Well, it is a pleasure to welcome Colin Flannigan to our studios this morning as we talk about BC seniors and the challenge of seniors living in poverty, hanging on by their very fingernails. Mr. Flannigan, what brought you to this subject?
Good morning, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Morning.
Well, this is an issue that I see regularly. I do represent a number of elder clients, and, sometimes when it comes down to it, talking about budgets and expenses, it's a tough situation. And originally I was planning on talking about a different topic today about multiple wills and assets in different jurisdictions. But then there was a study came out last week, and one of our other lawyers brought it to my attention. And talking about just the sheer number of elder members of our community that live below the poverty line, it was something I figured that we should be talking about right now.
Well, given that 29 days from now we'll pick a government, absolutely, it's a subject that needs to come forward. And, in this community, we are certainly always confronted with the reality of the life of seniors that live amongst us. And I know that the number that's out there is about $25,000, that most seniors are living on $25,000 or less, and sometimes significantly less. And they are way below the poverty line, and they are hanging on by their very fingernails. So I appreciate the fact that you've brought this forward for this morning's conversation. Where are we going to go within it?
All right. Well, at first, I just want to talk a little bit about the social reality that we're looking at. And then from there, I want to talk a little bit about what options there are available to people. And, of course, being a legal topic, I want to talk about how involvement this has with your legal rights, as well as perhaps involvement for powers of attorney. Because I think this is going to be important for people that are acting as a power of attorney for someone. You should really be listening to this and see what options there might be to help out.
Okay. Starting point is phone numbers at 250-862-2525. Along the way in this subject, at least for the next half hour, possibly longer, we open up our phones as well. If you've got questions, you'll hear things that'll cause you to wonder or want to know more. And our phones are open to you. Colin Flannigan, happy to take your calls, as we are as well. So, starting, and over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess the first reality is that you already hit the nail on the head right off the bat in saying that there is a good portion of seniors that are living on $25,000 or less. Now, the other harsh reality on that is that there is a disproportionate number of females as well, too. And some of
husband has died, and half the pension has disappeared.
Exactly. And, there's a lot of speculation as far as why that is, and a lot of it seems to stem from the wage gap that existed for previous generations. And now you're still seeing that prevail in the later stages in life as well, too. So that's one reality as well, too, that, unfortunately, it's not fair across the board. Unfortunately, when it comes to the ideal plan, we say, you know what, I want to leave this amount of money to my kids and my grandkids. But that's just not the reality for a lot of people. I mean, the vast majority of seniors that have high asset values, it's a very slim minority of the population.
Yeah, I think that we haven't advanced far enough down the road yet. That many of our seniors are still our grandmothers and our grandfathers. We're only 2 generations removed, maybe 3 generations removed from an economy that was basically agriculturally based or resource based at the very low end of the scale. And the pension plans didn't exist. Medical plans didn't exist. You effectively did the very best you could, but you were at a subsistence level and never seemed to be able to rise above it.
Exactly. And now what do you do when you don't have that same level of income anymore? And, now that we've done the bit of a doom and gloom start to it, I think now is a good point to try to do a little ray of sunshine say, you know what, just because things look bleak and look bad right now doesn't mean there's not options available open to seniors. And from a legal standpoint, what I'll say this to either anyone that is living in this or these circumstances, or anyone that is acting as a power of attorney for someone who you feel might be in these circumstances, please listen, because we're going to talk about some options and some programs available. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is not saying that this is all there is, but these are just some examples out there that might be able to help someone's quality of life.
All right.
Okay, so one of the first ones is when we start reaching an elder stage in our lives, we start having a greater need for medications. Now, this can get quite expensive, particularly when we start talking about what brand name costs are and whether or not there's a need for brand names. So one of the first things, there is assistance for pharmacy requirements and pharmacy needs. One of the first ones that people may or may not be aware of is Fair Pharmacare. And this is one program that is out there based on income level. So for those that live below that, have that low income level, then this is something they should be looking into, because this is something that could really help. You know, every little dollar and cent can make a difference in someone's life. So this is a first place to start. Now, there's more than one pharmacy-related program on there. The reason why I'm mentioning Fair Pharmacare is because that one's the income-related one. Now, there is other care-based related programs as well, too, that are more based on care needs. So an example might be for people living in full-time residential care facilities. There's a different program for that. For people needing psychiatric care, there's a different program for that. And it's definitely worth something looking into as well. So if you've got pharmacy needs and medication needs, and you've got a low income, this is something that I would strongly recommend to taking a look at.
I've had the pleasure, and it has been a pleasure over the last couple of months of working in the Kelowna General Hospital as a volunteer. But I end up in a lot of other conversations as I'm making coffees at the parking lot as a barista. But I run into all these people. And there's a couple of them that have spoken to me because they wanted me to know that they've had to cut their prescription in half, that if they're taking 4 pills a day as prescribed by their doctor, in fact, they're only taking 2. 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, as opposed to 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, because they can't afford to prescribe the way that the doctor's written the prescription. So they're trying to stretch it out. Any number of people who are doing that right now.
It's a sad reality, and unfortunately, it's true for a lot of people out there. So before you think
about... So Fair Pharmacare is a first step to a big solution.
Exactly. And that one can make a big difference for a lot of people's lives, because what we're talking about is their health-related issues with their medication. So I think that's got to be a first place that people look at. Now, one of the next major big-ticket items is accommodation. So I want to talk a little bit about rent. Now, I know I've spoken about care facilities and the way those calculations work on previous shows. What I want to talk about now is not so much for people that are living in care facilities, but people that are still living independently and they're living in rental accommodations. And the program is called SAFER. SAFER is a program that's available to people to provide a subsidy for their rental income. So there's going to be requirements. Most of them are going to be age-based, as well as there's calculations on what percentage of your income you're spending on your rental amount. And the way SAFER generally works, it's another provincially based program. So SAFER stands for, and let me read my little sheet here, the Shelter Aid for Elderly Renters. And what I would recommend for anyone that is in a rental situation and you're noticing that you are paying a very significant portion towards your rental amount, this is a program that might be able to provide some relief and benefit to you. If you're over the age of 60, you have lived in British Columbia for 12 months immediately preceding your application, you and your if you are in a spousal situation, you meet the citizenship requirements, which is, you know, as one might expect, that if you are a refugee, you've applied for refugee status, that you're either Canadian citizenship. The last requirement is that you pay more than 30% of your gross, that's your before tax, monthly household income towards rent. So if you do, then there is a little bit of a breakdown as far as how much of a supplement you might receive. Sorry, excuse me.
No problem.
The calculations will be based on what your income is, as well as what your rental amount is and how much you're spending on different things. There is a minimum amount that gets paid, and that usually goes directly into your bank account. So it works like a supplement. Usually, from what I can tell, it takes about a month or so after you're approved before you start seeing those benefits.
Safer was very much the center point of the conversation, dealing with the Kiwanis house just over here, where new owners had taken over the building, and any number of the tenants and the residents in that building had been living on a subsidized rental situation, suddenly found themselves unable to live there anymore, and Safer was increasingly mentioned as the source of additional income, the top-up, if you will, that would allow those people to stay in those apartments.
Especially considering what the rental market is like in Kelowna right now.
Truly.
This is something that I think can be very important to a lot of people and can make a huge difference.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. So we've dealt with pharmacare. Now we've dealt with rent. What's next on your grocery checklist? Groceries. Oh, okay. Do you know what? Before we launch into the next layer of this conversation, we are in conversation with Colin Flannigan from FH&P. He is our Tuesday morning law talk today. We're talking about seniors' issues and the programs and the abilities to reach out and lessen the burden, lessen the load is upon you if you're a senior or if you're caring for someone. There's a lot of valuable information here. Do need to take a break. When we come back, continuing our conversation with Colin Flannigan. And good morning. It is Tuesday. It's our Tuesday morning law talk. We are in conversation with Colin Flannigan from FH&P. He reached out to me and said, I want to talk about seniors' issues and the supports and the programs that are available and that are out there for seniors who may be having trouble making ends meet and just making it in general. We've talked about pharmacare, or fair pharmacare. We've talked about accommodation and housing. Colin, before we move to your next subject, I just wanted to point out that the number of seniors that I've talked to a degree on air, but more off air, where they've emailed me or called me and said, I am finding myself for the first time in my life having to look for a roommate. I've always been able to live on my own. I've always lived by myself, or, my spouse has died, be it male or female. And now to make ends meet, I'm having to look for somebody else to come into my life, come into my space, and for some of them, it's intimidating. For some of them, it's frightening. For some of them, they're at a stage in their lives where physically the idea of sharing space and having to be that open with your life is a frightening proposition to a lot of people.
It's definitely a reality for a lot of people as well, too. I mean, I know we were talking a little bit earlier about the housing market in Kelowna and what the rental situation is.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's very difficult to find rental accommodations. And the other reality is that it's not cheap. I mean, the market is what it is.
In some cases, it's substandard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reality then points to for seniors that have low incomes. And what does that mean? If you can't afford your one-bedroom place anymore, are a lot of people moving towards having roommates? And you know what that is? I mean, I am seeing that happening as well, too. And that raises its own questions and concerns about vulnerability as well as the privacy issues, which you just mentioned. And there can be concerns about that as well, too. And this is one of those important reasons why I wanted to talk about this topic and bring some of these programs to people's attention. Something like Safer, where you've got that either elderly neighbor, that elderly relative that is talking about possibly doing this, saying they can't afford their one-bedroom place anymore, and you might have the power of attorney, or maybe you don't even have the power of attorney, but you just know someone in this situation. Talk to them about the Safer program.
Yeah.
See if there is some benefit that might be able to be provided to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For young people, it's a whole lot easier to put an ad in the paper or an ad on Facebook or whatever, looking for a roommate. These are the parameters. This is the kind of person I'd like to share a space with. It's a little different when you're 67 or 70 or 71 years of age and suddenly having to share that place and share that space.
I absolutely agree.
I was about to say somebody should start up a business. There's dating organizations out there. There's all kinds of organizations. There should be somebody out there that sets up a business, and the business is built and based upon finding compatibility amongst people that are 65 and older who are forced to or having to look for a roommate situation. be interesting. We'll take your calls as well at 250-862-2525, 250-862-2525. If anything that we're saying raises questions in your mind, or you'd just like to contribute to the conversation. You want to talk about MSP now.
Yeah, that was going to be the next one up. And originally I was planning on thinking about mentioning that in the same breath as Fair Pharmacare just because of the interrelation. But I really want to mention the first two big ones right off the bat. And that is medication help and accommodation help.
Right.
Now, the next one is MSP. So that's the Medical Services Plan. This is healthcare. Now, everyone has to pay their premiums on this. The ability out there, though, is going to be for assistance. You can get temporary assistance or more of a permanent type of assistance on what your premium is set at. And this is another income-based reality. So if you are on the lower income, then you can potentially lower your MSP payment. And for some people to think, okay, well, how much is that really going to save me? There is a chart breakdown depending on how much your income is based on what you'll end up having to be paying for your MSP premium. But over a prolonged period of time, this can really make a big difference in people's lives as well, too. I mean, we're talking about situations where, finances might be tight and any little bit can make a difference. So depending on whether or not we've got one or two adults in the house, it will affect how much someone actually has to pay. So for people that are under $24,000, and this is when we're talking about, for the reality, for a large amount of our senior population is under $25,000, they might be paying $0 for their MSP. They might be able to get a full break on that.
So no matter what medical services they require, they're not being billed for it.
Well, I should say that's for their medical services plan,
right.
Premium.
Yeah.
As far as other types of programs, there might be some additional costs. I'm thinking things like ambulance or any private care facilities. More what I'm talking about is just the BC Medical Services Plan program. Right. Now, if you make up to $42,000 is where the cutoff on where different levels of assistance might be. And like I said, it's not a set kind of, well, it's a staggered rate is the best way to phrase that.
Formulatic?
Yes, exactly. Right. So depending on how much the income is, how many adults there are in the household, will set what the premium amount is or the premium assistance.
Okay. Moving on.
Next one I want to talk about is the senior supplement. So senior supplement is going to be a provincial top-up to old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. So generally speaking, we're talking about people that are 65 and older. Now, what I want to make sure people are aware of on this one is most people will just start seeing the senior supplement added on, and that's fantastic. It's going to be for making sure that it has been added for a lot of people. Just to also make sure that...
Okay, let's go through that slowly.
Okay.
So, is this an application process?
Generally speaking, no.
Okay.
And this is why I wanted to make sure that people are aware of it, so in case anyone gets missed. It should be automatic that when someone is receiving part of their old age security, get the senior supplement, it should automatically be added on. But I want to give an example for someone who is acting as the power of attorney scenario. What I would suggest recommending for someone acting in this situation is look into this. Make sure it's there. If it's not, then make sure that you contact the correct bodies to have the senior supplement added. The senior supplement is not a federal program. It's put on through the BC government, and it's an addition by the provincial government.
And it tops up your income.
Exactly. And now how much it is going to, once again, we're talking about formulas. Anytime we're dealing with extra little benefits on there, it is formulaic. So I can't really say an exact number how much you're going to get on this, but it is a program that can make a big difference as well too. So we'll talk a little bit about, the example of, Uncle Bob, who is, perhaps having some difficulty dealing with his finances, and, nephew's been asked to be his power of attorney. And FU's looking after the finances, doing a good job, making sure that, all the bills are being paid, but, things are tight. These are just some of the ways to look into to make sure that all the possible incomes are there for Uncle Bob. So look at the income, look at the old age security, make sure that there's the additional senior supplement added on there as well too. I mean, ideally, no one gets missed in this program, and that's the ideal world, but occasionally things do happen.
Does everyone receive the federal pension and the guaranteed income supplement, regardless of what your private pension may be?
That's a good question, and there's different types of programs. So, I mean, if we're talking about old age security versus Canada Pension Plan, those are going to be two very different types of programs. Old age security is one program that's going to be more open to people, whereas Canada Pension Plan is going to be based more on being a quote-unquote contributor under the Canada Pension Plan. So it's not really set across the board exactly what is available to absolutely everyone in the sense that we want to make sure that each person is treated individually and looking at what they're entitled to. So OAS is going to be the most common one that just what everyone's on. Guaranteed income is one of the other ones. But Canada Pension Plan, like I said, that one could be a little bit more different.
Right. Okay. Take a break. Back in a moment with Colin Flannigan on this Tuesday morning at AM 1150, FH&P Law Talk, talking seniors issues, talking primarily about elders and the programs that are available to you that you may not know about, that you should know about, how to access them, dealing with medical and dealing with accommodation, and lastly, dealing with financial. Back in a moment. Colin Flannigan from FH&P Lawyers in our studios for our Tuesday morning law talk, talking about seniors issues, in particular, dealing with the things like fair pharmacare, accommodations, MSP, your medical services plans, and the payments that you make, and so on. Colin, if I could, I just wanted to roll back the conversation a couple of degrees when we were talking about medicine and pharmaceuticals, and my understanding of knowing seniors that arbitrarily in their own homes are cutting their medication in half. Never mind what the doctor has prescribed. They're cutting it in half to stretch it out as long as they can. And I've often wondered, and I've seen editorial, and certainly as the federal government approaches and we go into a provincial government as well, it strikes me that one of the things that is really missing in this country is a national pharmacare plan, where the government of the country, this country, should be buying in bulk drugs that are then distributed to seniors across the country. It works in other countries, and I sometimes don't know why we're not doing it here.
Well, we would have a slightly more complicated situation. And this comes back to a constitutional question, and it has to do with the division of powers between the federal government and the provincial governments. And healthcare falls under the auspice of provincial governments.
And highly guarded.
Exactly.
Protected.
Whenever you have a division of powers, there's going to be protection over what is ours and what is yours. And as far as wanting to develop any level of federal program, there would be some very significant obstacles, and whether or not those could even be overcome would be a serious question. It would seem more likely that if there is going to be any sort of movement towards that type of a program, it would strike me as being more likely to being on the provincial level as opposed to being a national level.
Where the provinces are working together cooperatively to buy drugs for their resident population.
Yeah. I'm not suggesting that's ever going to happen,
Yeah.
but just as far as the way the division of powers goes between the provinces and the federal government, what would fall within the auspice of the powers of the provincial government, that would strike me as being the body that would be more capable of taking up that task.
Right. Okay. All right. A little further down your checklist, sir. A fascinating program. I'm glad we're doing this, and I thank you.
All right. Well, the main topic that I really want to talk about was just bringing this to people's attention. And these programs that we've spoken about are not an exhaustive list. There is a number of other programs that are out there and available to people. This is just some examples, because if I could just bring it back a little bit to the original study that brought my attention to this, was one of the lines that I know Phil and I were speaking about this was saying, well, on average, it's still, it's not that bad. We're looking at as far as what income levels are.
On average, it's not that bad. Relative to what?
Well, but then what does average really mean?
Yeah.
If we're looking at it, yes, perhaps the top 20% of seniors are wealthy and have accumulated a significant amount of wealth.
Buy a new car every 2 years, or lease a new car every 2 years, take a holiday every second year, go south to Palm Beach to spend a little time.
Yeah, but the reality of that is, so if you've got such a top-heavy amount that holds such a high proportion of the wealth, that means you've got a corresponding element that's on the other end of the spectrum.
The base of the pyramid is larger, broader, deeper, and hanging on.
Exactly. So the reality is that for a lot of people out there, these programs exist because people need them. And not enough people are taking advantage of these programs. That's another thing that wasn't included necessarily in this study that I've seen in other studies, that a lot of these programs that we've spoken about today are underutilized. So that's the part that really made me nervous when I did a little research more into this program after seeing the study, was how few people that would be eligible for these programs are using them.
That could be accessing them and not.
Exactly.
Either from a point of view that they don't know they exist at all, or the paperwork's too onerous. Where do you see the center point of that?
Probably a bit of both, in all honesty. And that's one of the reasons why, A, I want to talk about these programs, and B, I wanted to bring this back, and I've mentioned the term a couple times, power of attorney. So if someone is acting as a power of attorney, you do have obligations towards the person that granted that to you. You've got to look out for that person's best interest. They've entrusted you with a lot of powers. You should really be making sure that you are fulfilling your fiduciary obligations. You're acting in their best interests. These are some of these programs that maybe this person may not have either known about, or maybe that they found the paperwork too difficult to fill out in the first place, and that's the reason why they're not on it. But if you're going to start acting as someone's power of attorney, start going through the finance that they have and the qualifications they've got for these other programs. And if they would qualify for one of these programs and aren't getting it, we should really be...
You're not doing your job.
Well, it might be a little harsh, but perhaps maybe this is something that you can really help this person out by
You can do it better.
This. Exactly. And, the same thing when we're talking a bit about the senior supplement as well, too, just to make sure that new set of fresh eyes on it can make sure that everything that someone might be entitled to, they are receiving.
So let's bring this full circle back to your desk over there at FH&P. Do you have a checklist that you take someone who has power of attorney through, or do you have a checklist that you would take a husband and wife who've come to you to say, we don't have much, but we know we need to leave a will, and we know we need to do some planning? As you talk to them about producing that will to, give these bequests and bequeaths to various children within their circle, do you in fact also say, listen, let's take a look at a couple of other things here?
To be perfectly honest with you, this is something that I think I can be better at as a lawyer, in making sure that when I'm meeting with my clients that we are going over things like this, because it's more of a one-off scenario, because a lot of these programs are, whether or not they fit for someone is up to the individual circumstances. So, when someone starts acting as a power of attorney, the lawyer's going to have the obligation to the person that they prepared the power of attorney for. So what advice can they give to the person acting as attorney can raise some questions about conflicts of interest and what can actually be provided to them. I mean, the whole idea is you want to help someone act in the client's best interest, the person who granted in the first place. So, this is perhaps something that, lawyers generally could do better at as well, too, is making sure people are aware of these programs and maybe not just treating it as a one-off situation and saying, you know what, when I'm meeting with one client, sort of, we're talking about the cost of these and what income is available to them and saying, okay, well, where you're living now, do you have Safer as an extra supplement? What are you taking for medications? Do you have an extra supplement for fair pharmacare? And I think these are conversations that should just be had more generally, period. Not just with your lawyer, but with your family members as well, too.
Or family members need to say, Mom, Dad, we need to take a look at this for you. I know that you proudly have looked after your life until now, but we're concerned that maybe there's some pieces of this that may be missing.
Well,
or you've maybe missed.
Seniors care just doesn't fall on one person. It's everyone that's involved with this should be looking to help.
All right. Listen, I thought we might receive a couple of phone calls with people asking for more information or, to a degree, passing comment. This is certainly a topical conversation that I'm sure will register with a huge number of people. To the phones, Barbara, good morning.
Good morning. I would like to know how much the cost of preparing a power of attorney.
Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning, Colin.
Thank you very much for calling. A power of attorney can depend on whether or not it's just one person granting it or if there's more than one person as well, too.
My husband and I would be appointing our daughter.
You'd both be appointing your daughter? Mm-hmm. So usually what we try to do is try to reduce costs if we are meeting with more than one person at a time. We say we're granting powers of attorney to each other and then to one's daughter to try to reduce the cost. So normally one person granting a power of attorney would be around $200 plus tax and disbursements. But when we're doing as a couple, sometimes we try to reduce that down to about $350 plus taxes and disbursements.
Wow. So we're looking around about $400.
No, if it would be for you and your husband, it would be including with the tax and disbursements, it unfortunately does get up there a little bit. So that's one of the unfortunate realities is that estate planning, unfortunately, it's not cheap, but it is important. And that's the reason why I want to talk about the topic today and show about other ways that people can generate some other income to bring in and assist with these.
Barbara, can I ask you, do you access the OAS or the income supplement? Do you?
We don't get the supplement, unfortunately. I think we just scrape holding on by fingernails above it, so we don't get that. But we have only been in this country 38 years.
Only 38 years?
Yeah. Well, according to the government, that gives us a very small OAS. So, our OAS is quite small. And although we're English, we if anyone knows about the English pension, it's frozen from the time you leave UK. And so our English pension is very tiny also. And, of course, we're dealing constantly with the rate of exchange, which at the moment is putting us around about $250 a month down on our small income. So,
how are you doing this?
What do you mean, how?
How are you managing to make this work?
Well,
You do?
Pull Peter from one perch and pay Paul on the other perch.
Wow.
Okay, Barbara, what?
We scrape by. We do without certain things, and medication is quite high on my list now. My husband is perfectly fine, but I have to have medication. But you stiff up a lip,
Well, I heard for you. I was thrilled when Colin said he wanted to talk about this subject, and I was hoping that more seniors might phone and give us a snapshot of their scenario. And so many of you, stiff upper lip. We'll do the best we can. We'll hang on by our proverbial fingernails.
Yeah, you just have to cut your cloth, as the saying goes.
Yeah, Barbara, what I might suggest then is I'm going to give you my direct telephone line, and I'll ask you to give me a call maybe later this afternoon. And
I'm going to have to go inside. I went outside because we have the radio.
Do you know what? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get Daniel to take you back off air and take your number off air, and he can pass your number to Colin, and Colin can phone you.
Yeah, Barbara, I'll give you a call later this afternoon, and we'll try and make something work for you, okay?
Okay, that's super. Thanks, Colin.
Thank you very much for calling, Barbara.
Dan, thanks. If you could do that, I'd appreciate. Again, I had thought we might receive a number of calls like that, but I think that many seniors who live within our society have a hard time voicing the challenge of being alive, of staying alive, of surviving. If you figure right now, hydro costs are going up, rents are going up, natural gas costs are going up. At every turn, seniors right now are dealing with an ever-increasing cycle of increase of costs. Colin Flannigan, are you going to put this up on your website?
Yes, I will.
All right. Listen, I really appreciate you being here. Well chosen this morning, my friend. Colin Flannigan can be found at FH&P. Go to the website. Knock upon the part of the website, although many of you maybe don't even have access to the internet because you can't afford it. Other than that, then call FH&P and ask for Colin Flannigan. Sir, thanks for being here.